Fantastic. Kerry, really good to see you. Liam, great to see you. Elaine, good to see you. Not Hamid, good to see
Thanks,
everybody.
Sunil.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, really good to see you. As I say, this evening, we've put a special event on because last week near the end of our Zoom meeting, we had a young guy called Dan. He was really good, asking lots of questions, and this is your opportunity. It is totally ask us anything. Paul's
within reason, anything within reason.
Yeah. Elaine, good evening. I was just saying hello to you.
Good evening. Hi, Paul. Hi, Sunil. Hi, folks.
Really good to see you. As
Thank you.
Really good to see everyone. So let's get started. So Paul's going to start off by introducing himself. Most of you know me, but I can do a quick introduction.
Well, do you want to do your introduction first?
Yeah, I'm not as prepared as you with slides, but most people know me. But
I don't know where my slides are. Can anybody see my slides? Because I
we
can
can
only
see your slides. You just need to go back to the beginning, Paul.
I don't know where my slides are. Wait a minute. Where are my slides?
So while Paul's just looking for his slides, I'll just go through. I'm a traditional buy and hold landlord. I don't sell properties that I own myself. I've been in property for over 34 years, I think now. I have property portfolio in Kent, and I have a property portfolio in Stoke-on-Trent. Kent covers down to Dover, and up as most Gillingham. I've got some in Gillingham, etc. So that's there, and we also have an estate agency. This is not an image. This is my office, and then it goes around to there. I got into from buy to lets. I got into commercial conversions, commercial property, and then into land and planning and things like that. And over the last couple of years that I've known Paul, certainly in the last 6 months, Paul's been helping me as a consultant to our business to help us grow, to help us understand, get a different perspective. Certainly on the partnership side, it's been very, very beneficial to work with a consultant that's got many years of this business experience, putting things into perspective, helping me to understand where the other person is coming from. So yeah, lots of fantastic value, and I know that those guys on here who've worked with Paul would agree with me in terms of the value that's added. So Paul, I think if you can just go back one slide.
I'm still trying to find my slides. I love technology. It's even better when it works, you know.
You know what? If it doesn't matter, if you just want to, if you know the first slides, then you.
Let me just see if I can find. Where are we?
So in a minute, when Paul's introduced himself, what we're going to do is you can ask questions or put them in the chat, and then if we can just respect one question at a time, that would be absolutely fantastic. And Paul's going to do his utmost to give you value and answer questions for you. I hope everybody's in. Yeah. So good evening, Jodie, and good evening, Maria. I just see you pop up on the screen there. So that was the one, Paul. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've got it now.
Excellent. Well done. Over to you, my friend. Thank you.
Okay. So good evening. Paul Merrick, Scottish business owner, angel investor, business consultant, professional speaker, obviously not professional with slides, but professional speaker, property developer, and co-author of a book called Unpacking Your Property Business Plan. A little bit about myself. I established my first business at the age of 15 and was exporting vehicle components halfway around the world by the time I was in my 20s. Our first property company was opened in 1998. Started buying property in the early 90s, but opened our first property company in 1998. We did that with less than £40,000. I'm now involved in a number of businesses across different sectors, including the property industry. I have been involved in developing many properties over the years and have built up a debt-free portfolio of both commercial and residential properties that is now valued in the millions. Because I love investing my time in people and sharing my experience I have garnered during the 30 years in the property industry and 45 years in business. I now spend a lot of my time as a business consultant working with small businesses and solopreneurs. There we go. It wasn't worth all the hunt for the slides, really, was it? Anyway, good evening. As Sunil says, what we intend to do is we intend to make this a very open Q&A and just kind of ask any property or business related question that you like. Hopefully the slides have gone and my technology worked and it's just us back here. Yes?
Yes, perfect. Everything's great. Everything's good. And again, I just want to acknowledge everyone for being here this evening. Although it's free, you're still giving up your time. And I promise you will get so much value in the next hour. So what we're going to start off with, if anybody's got a question, if you want to raise your hand on either physically or actually on the screen, you can, if you go to the bottom and it says react, and then you can raise your hand there. We'll take the questions because this is open forum. Anybody can ask anything. Anybody want
Not all at once, one at a time will do. It's probably better that way. So come on, guys. So Sunil's been in property for about the same as me, about 30 years. We've had very different journeys, which is why I think these things are quite interesting. I started my property journey, as it says, in development. Sunil started his, like many other people, in buy-to-let. We've been involved in many things, both of us, over the years, and it's strange how kind of Sunil has eventually come to my side of the fence, rightly or wrongly, and he's now a property developer as well. So there must be some questions that you guys have about development, about buy-to-let, about property in general, or even kind of businesses in general. I think there's a couple of kind of comments in the comment section. If you want to pick up the comment section, Sunil, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. Tony's asked a question. I think Tony wants to come in, and Daniel. Daniel, is it okay if ladies go first? Thank you. Tony, over to you if you want to unmic. That'd be fantastic, and good to see you.
Hi, well, it's very nice to be here, and I'm honoured to be the first one to speak. So hopefully it's worth it. But just very quickly, I've got a very small portfolio myself, so 2 properties. Bought through my own money, but obviously I'm wanting to scale up a little bit now and wondering how I find investors. Being that I'm such a small outfit, how would I go about finding investors that I can work with?
Okay, I'll let Sunil go first and then I'll come second.
Okay, I thought you were answering all the questions. I was just hosting. How would you find investors? What are you doing at the moment to find investors?
Well, it's really just through my personal networks. So but I don't know where to start looking outside of my personal networks.
Okay, and why are you looking for investors? I think that's always a key question. Is why are you looking for it? I understand that you may need money, but is there any equity in your buy-to-lets, in homes, anywhere else?
I do have some equity, but I think probably like Paul, I'm looking to use other people's money to grow my business rather than I've got a lot of money invested in the properties I own at the minute, but it's now time for other people's money to come in to help me grow the business.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So you've just asked the question, which is fantastic, and what you've done is you've spoken to the other 29 people in here, and you said, I'm looking for money to invest. So how much are you looking for? I think that you need clarity around that, and what are you going to do with it, and what would the person get in return? That's 3 questions.
Okay. Well, this would be for developing, so it would be to purchase property or properties to develop and then sell on, and obviously I'm assuming to start small, so flats, smaller houses, that kind of thing, and then build up and up and up from there. So in terms of how much, it's a bit of a piece of string, isn't it? But I suppose you can't get very much around here for less than about 200, 300,000.
Yeah, but what would be your ideal amount of money to? So are you looking that person to actually fund the purchase? Are you looking for them then to you put the work in and
Yeah. So the business model I have in my head is that the property is purchased by the investor. Then I would put in the sweat equity and the project management to bring it around to being able to sell for a profit. And then I'd take a cut of the profits when it was sold or when it was let or whenever.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd be looking for.
That's brilliant. So if you're listening in, if you could just give me a 1 in the chat box if you think that's a really good idea, what Tony's proposing, that she's looking for a property and she's looking for investment. So if you think that's a really good idea, please put a 1 in the chat. That's great. Thank you. I think, Paul, did you want to come in here? Because I think I've asked a load of questions, but we can come back to that as well.
Yeah. So, so many questions. And I think that's a great topic for people to start with. I think the real question she just asked is, where do I get the money to move up? Yeah. Is that you use the expression investors, right? And we'll discuss that. But is the real question, the fundamental question, not a different question, which is, I want to grow my business. Remember, property is a business. Now, where do I find the money to grow my business? Because I've used my own money, right? Where do I find more money? Is that the real essence of the question? I'd prefer if you unmuted and kind of spoke with me and I didn't speak at you. I like to speak with people and not at them. That's the real question.
A reasonable summary, yeah.
Yes. So we've all had that. I started my business 30 years ago, my property business 30 years ago with £40,000, which sounds a lot 40 years ago, but it wasn't. And I started my first business when I was 15 with £15. So usually in business, there's always that question of where do I find the money? Now, one of the most common ways to find money, or one of the ways that's promoted, shall we call it that, in the property world is to find these elusive things called investors, right? And most people who have went out for looking for investors find them pretty elusive, right? And strangely enough, I'm a professional investor, so I'm not that elusive, right? There's several points about that, right? How do you define an investor? Well, the first thing is that you couldn't come on here, to stay within the realms of the law. You couldn't come on here and ask everybody in this room if they wanted to invest. That's actually illegal, right? Because someone has to be qualified as an investor. They have to be of high net worth or sophisticated investor. So the real question is, where do you find those people? Where do you find people of high net worth, right, and sophisticated investors? I would say the least likely place to find them is in a property room, right? A room that's called property networking,
Yeah.
right? Because 99.9% of the people that are in that room, if not 100%, are looking for money, and the people with money are somewhere else. So here's the question, where's that somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So you said, like Paul, I'm looking for other people's money. Strangely enough, I am now at this ripe old age able to finance most of my own projects, if not all of my own projects. Although that doesn't mean I still don't bring people in, because I think they bring something to the party more than money. So I tend to, at this stage in my life, bring people in because they have more than money. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you find people who are high net worth and sophisticated investors? Well, those people are likely to be reasonably comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. I remember I thought I'd made it when my mum said to me, I think you're comfortable now, Paul. Right. I thought that meant, right, okay, I must have a couple of quid because my mum says I'm comfortable. Right. So you've got to find people who are reasonably comfortable, right? You are allowed to laugh at the jokes, incidentally. So you go places where they're reasonably comfortable. So when I first started, and I wasn't in the privileged position that I am now, what I did was I looked at the things that I was interested in, me as an individual, right?
Yeah.
And what common interests I might have with people who might have a bob or two. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a story, because I've got a story for every God-given occasion. I'm a caraholic, right? I love cars. Not like, you know, I'm very boring for a bloke. I like cars, right? And I decided to go to an auction one day when I had a small pot of money, and I spent £5,000 of that small pot of money on a car
Yeah.
when everybody said it should have been in my business. But that car was a Mark I Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. And that let me join the Rolls-Royce Owners Club. Now, there was plenty of guys in the Rolls-Royce Owners Club like me, right,
Yeah.
who had cars that weren't worth a lot of money, but there was a heck of a lot of people in the Rolls-Royce Owners Club who had an awful lot of money. And did I go to those meetings and say, hi, I'm Paul, I'm a property developer, would you like to invest in me? No, I didn't. I had an ordinary conversation with people about cars and about life and about my son and about my wife. And, you know, and we all got used to complaining about our wives together, and we all got used to complaining about our children together. And eventually people said to me, what do you do? And I said, I do property.
Yeah.
And what kind of property do you do? And then I started to tell them. And here's an interesting thing. Through my career, I have had numerous what you would call angel investors, like I am now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know how many people I have asked to invest in me?
Oh, is it like nil? You've never asked?
Zero.
Yeah.
They've always asked, what are you doing? How could I get involved in that?
Yeah.
The best I ever had was a very posh chap who said, I like what you do, Paul. Right. And I said, do you? He said, yes. He said, how do I get a leg in that horse? Because, and I didn't understand the expression at the time, right? And I said, what does that mean? He said, when we go and buy horses, really expensive horses for racing, we don't all buy a £1 million or £500,000 horse. We buy a bit of a horse each. He said, so I would like a leg in your horse. Right. So what would I say to you? Find where there's people who are likely to be high net worth individuals, right? Sophisticated investors. Find something you have in common with them, right? And then just get to know them as people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has worked very well for me. One of my clients a few years ago said, that's great, Paul, but I'm not interested in cars. And I said, what are you interested in? Because he took it very literally, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, what are you interested in? So we went through some of the things he was interested in. And one of the things he was interested in, he's been clay pigeon shooting a couple of times, right? Just on holiday, but he really liked it. And I said, join a clay pigeon shooting club, right? And he came back and he said, I've joined a clay pigeon shooting club, Paul. I really like clay pigeon shooting. And not only that, you should see the cars that drive up outside. And about a number of weeks later, he came back and he went, I found somebody who wants to work with me.
Yeah.
At the clay pigeon shooting, he said, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't go to property network events looking for money. I'm not saying don't go to property network events, you're at one. And I'm wonderfully entertaining, it's worth coming. But second, somebody will smile eventually, I'm sure. But it's perhaps the accent. I maybe need to get Sunil to translate. But just go to places where people are likely to be, who are likely to have the type of money that you would want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just get to know them as people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good tip. Thank you. I'll take that on board. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Tony, thank you for the question. And I think that reminds me that of a story, because I go networking a lot, you know, a couple of times a week, a couple of times a month. Jazz, my good friend here, is here. He runs Kent Property Meet. I was there quite a lot. You know, there's lots of meetings that I used to go to. Then I go home, I talk to my wife Geeta, and she says, oh, I spoke to so-and-so, and, you know, I got you a new landlord, or we got a new landlord for the business, or, you know, this person wants this. And all she's doing is she goes to the gym every day, and it's Dave Lloyd's in London, and she meets people there that have probably have had professional jobs, are now coming into not retirement, but semi-retirement. They're going to the gym, they've got cash, lots of cash, etc. So yeah, the gym for her has been a really, really good place. The other weekend, I went home and she said, oh, we're just going to go to Windsor because there's somebody that wants to, he's got a boat and he was looking to get 10 people to buy a share in the boat, like Paul was saying. that we went to see him, and he said, oh, I don't have a lot of time today, but because I'm going to go and sign some trusts deeds. So we went to this thing. Oh, I'm interested in that. So he took us to this guy who was doing deeds and trust, etc. So one conversation leads to another. But I think you're a lovely person. So yeah, it's just getting out there. Property meetings, as Paul said, they're all the same. People are looking for money. But promoting yourself on social media is really important, because that is such an easier way to do things nowadays.
Yeah.
That would be
Hamilton the musical.
Sorry, somebody's not muted.
Yes. Then you would have got it's a F1 driver, but then you would have said musical. This round is going.
just 1 second. I can.
Oh dear.
So yeah, Tony, I don't know if that helps you in any way, or
Yeah, it does.
but I think this time of the year, it's also, you're going into a fantastic time to meet people, because you may be out socializing, you're going to parties, or you may be just meeting people that, you maybe have not seen all year.
Yeah.
And that's the opportunity to go, oh, what are your plans next year? And they're going to ask you the same question: what are your plans?
Yeah.
Looking for property, looking to expand. But I think there's, great time of the year, and also going forward into next year is great time of the year as well.
Yeah. That's great. No, thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Can I just comment on something? There's a few comments kind of coming up, and it's getting a bit hard to follow. So can we save the comments for questions, because it's kind of getting a bit hard for me to follow between the kind of conversations and the questions. So can we save the comments for questions, please?
Yeah. Did you have a follow-up question there, Tony, or does that help you? And I really, again, appreciate you asking a question, because it benefits everybody.
No follow-up, but I might put my hand up again later.
Yeah, please do. So,
You're allowed more than one question. I'm not sure if you're allowed more than two. It depends on how it goes.
no, we'd love to get to that stage where we have so many questions that we have to limit it. But as investors,
I think Eric put his hand up.
yeah, I'm just going to go back to Eric. One second. I was just going to say something, that as property people, business people, we're looking for two things always. And I went to a broker's office, and he was a land broker, and he had two whiteboards, and one in one corner and one in the other corner. In this corner, he had a whiteboard with all the deals he was working on, and in that corner, he had a list of all the investors that he was working to. So we're always looking for two things. We're looking for investors, and we're looking for deals, and our job is to match them up. So I hope that helps. But yeah, I think Daniel's first, and if we come back to you, Eric, as well, is that okay? Because I think Daniel was waiting.
Oh, yeah.
I just had a comment about what Paul and you were just talking about for Tony. So I don't mind talking after Daniel, but it might be more appropriate to come in now.
Yeah, please.
It's just a little story to back up exactly what Paul was talking about. And Tony, it's not just about going to where people are, who have money and different places like that. It's just being ready at any given moment. And I want to give you a little example. So I was in the gym changing room with my son at the time. He was about 8 years old, and I had biscuits in my bag, and we had just been swimming, and we were changing, and he was saying, Dad, can you give me the biscuits? I want biscuits now. You know how persistent kids can be. And I said, no, you can wait until after we've had dinner, and like everyone else. And these two guys across the changing room said, give him the biscuits, go on, be a decent dad. And I was just like, who are these guys? So I struck up a conversation with them, and I said, oh, well, thanks for the support, guys. I really appreciate it. You clearly aren't fathers. And then I sort of said, oh yeah. And then we had a little bit of banter. And then I said, what do you do for a living? And one of them said, and I said, I'm sorry? He said, and I said, I didn't get you the second time. Could you please tell me exactly what you do? He said, I'm a racing driver. And I happen to be a coach and an NLP trainer. And my ears pricked up, and I said, wow. So do you get onto the podium a lot? And he said, not as often as I'd like to. And I said, look, there's only 3 reasons why you wouldn't be 100% successful. And that is 1, negative emotions, 2, limiting beliefs, 3, ineffective strategies, or any combination of those 3 things. And he was getting very interested now. I said, I work with people in eliminating or improving those 3 areas of their lives. And he said, wow, have you got a card? And my heart sank. Okay, bear in mind, I've got like some cruddy sweatpants on and a holy t-shirt. I was not dressed for the occasion. It's in the changing room, for goodness sake. Anyway, so I said, no, I don't have my card, but I'll write my details down. And I got this like sweaty little piece of paper and a pen, and the pen wouldn't write properly. And I thought, there's no way this guy's going to buy into it. But because I had been so convincing, because I was in the right place at the right time, I gave him my details, and sure enough, he called me. He became a client, and I took him through my program, and he got onto the podium a lot more often after that. So you never know when you're going to meet somebody. So have that open mind and be ready. Be ready with your spiel. Practice it, practice it, practice it. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely brilliant story, Eric. And I think it was right time to come in. So appreciate that. And hopefully you can contribute a bit more in a bit. That'd be thank you. Daniel, did you want to come in, please?
Hi, everyone. Yes, my question is, Paul, you mentioned some of the commercial property deals that you have done previously, and sounds quite interesting in that respect. Obviously, commercial properties are a bit of a dark art, and it's quite clever how a lot of the strategies, it's just a paperwork exercise. So if you wouldn't mind, elaborate a little bit more on the commercial side of property, that would be incredible.
That's a question that's as long as the bit of string, whichever length the bit of string is. What would I say about commercial property if I was generalising about it? I would say that a lot of people are afraid of commercial property, right? And I'm very glad of that fact. It's made me a reasonably good living for 30 years, other people's fear of commercial property. Unlike the residential sector, where people aren't afraid enough of the residential sector. And I think I was saying this, recently on a clubhouse that I was on, is I was chatting to a mentee of someone else, and they said, oh, I don't really know much about commercial property. And I said, do you know a lot about residential property? And he said, well, I know a lot more about residential property. So I started to ask him some questions about residential property. And he started to not know the answers, despite the fact he was on a quote mentorship. And he said, turns out I don't know very much about residential property either. I said, no. I said, but you perceive that you know a lot about residential property because you've probably rented a house, you've probably bought a house, right? And you might even have sold a house. But you've probably rented a car, you've probably drove a car, you've probably hired a car, and you might even have sold a car, but you're not becoming a car salesman. Property's property. Essentially the same rules apply in business, whether it's residential or whether it's commercial. I've never seen the difference. I'll bore you with a story of how I got into property. I used to sell construction plant, diggers and dumpers and things. I had an okay business doing that. But I always found it really difficult to find the stock. It was used stock, and I always found it really difficult to find the used stock. I had 1,000 people saying I want to buy a JCB, Paul, but I could only find 100 JCBs. That's a rubbish business model. Right. A good business model is I can buy 1,500 JCBs and sell 1,000, but a rubbish business model is I can sell 1,000 and only buy 100. And I was walking down a road in Glasgow called Merrick Road one day, which is quite a long road and kind of, at that point in time had a bit of countryside in it, had a bit of commercial on it, had a bit of residential on it. And I looked around and I thought, property's everywhere. There's residential property, there's commercial property, there's industrial property, there's agricultural property. And somebody's making money out of all of this. And I made a decision that day, Daniel, that somebody was me. And since then, I am proud to say that I have made money out of residential property, commercial property, industrial property, and agricultural property. So this black art that you talk about is only a black art because you're afraid of it. It's just property.
Yeah,
It has the same rules apply.
Yeah, I think really I kind of get the gist of the valuation side of things. However, you know, if you have you know, a commercial business in there, so let's say they're stronger than others. So in the past, for instance, it's a bank. Now, not so much. But if you had a bank versus, you know, hairdressers, for instance, obviously two massively different scales. However, let's say it was in the same unit itself. My understanding is that the property is going to be worth significantly more, you know, with a longer, you know, commercial lease with the bank compared to even if it was at the same duration with like a hairdresser's. So that's really what I'm alluding to in regards to the dark art, because, you know, one valuation compared to another, just different people could be same exact lease, could be completely two different values. So that's kind of what I'm getting at a little bit. So yeah,
We're doing alluding and getting at. So why don't you? I don't really understand the point of your question, right? What's the value?
Depending on who.
No. Give me a right. I'm not understanding your question, right? Are there different values in commercial property because they have different tenants or because they're in different locations? Yes, of course there are, right? Are there different values in residential properties because they're in different locations and attract a different clientele? Of course there are. Where's I'm missing the issue.
So depending on who you have in as a tenant, the valuations can vary significantly, even if the lease is for the same.
No, you're saying the same thing to me again. Where's the issue?
One value is higher compared to another.
And what?
Why?
Because they are. Because it's dependent on a lot of factors. Surely the only factor that really matters is, can I buy this and put this person in here and make money? Isn't that the only factor?
Yeah, of course, but the values are a bit different. I'll give you an example at the moment. So me and Sunil have been working together on a property. It's currently got a lease for a bank. It's got quite large development potential. It's got a lease until 2025. It's also got a large car park at the rear. We have sketched up some plans with the architect, and we've worked out you know, what we can potentially get on there. This is, you know, moving on to a different subject.
Indeed it is, because we were talking about commercial property a moment ago, and now we're talking about development. Yeah,
but it's former commercial, and it's actually changing. So in regards to the valuation of the properties, it stands, although it is in the lease. I'll let Sunil explain it a little bit better than me. So I'll leave that over to him. But yeah, it's just a separate thing. So the first one was the valuation side of things on commercial, and then the second one is obviously development. So yeah, just moving on to the second bit.
Sorry. So I think I understand your question, Daniel. Here's your question, because it's difficult, but I'll try. Right. How do I, Daniel, value commercial property? Yes? Is that the real question?
I think the real question, yeah, that is part of the question. The question is that we have an owner who's been in commercial property a lot of his life and doesn't know the area that we operate in. He lives in London or somewhere else, etc., etc. He has a certain view on the value of his bank. He's not a bank, he owns the building. The bank is currently exited that building. However, they're paying rent on the lease, which will end next year. But he has a certain value in his head. We have a much lower value, knowing that the rest of the high street, etc., and knowing the value of commercial property. I think the question is around how do we persuade him that the value?
Well, therefore
Our-
the question has nothing to do with commercial property. It's how do you do a negotiation? That's
Yeah.
a negotiation question.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not
So
a commercial property question. It's a negotiation question.
No,
Let
appreciate
me go back to Daniel's original question, because people might be interested in this. How do you value commercial property? Well, I've been doing it for 30 years. Here's how I value commercial property. It's very simple. I'm a very simple human being. I seem to have made a reasonable living being this simple, but I'm a very simple human being. Right, okay. Eric runs a coaching business. Eric wants to rent a unit from me. Yeah. He wants me to be his landlord. And I say to Eric, how much can you afford the year, Eric, for your rent? You need to unmute.
Sorry.
In this hypothetical situation, you're going to rent a unit to run your coaching business from. How much can you afford to pay a year?
I've budgeted 10 grand for that.
Okay, there you go. What margin do I want to make? Yeah. So I tend to work on commercial property. Our worst commercial property 17%, our best commercial property 64%, our average is mid-20s. Right, so I want to work on mid-20s, right? So what can I afford to pay for a property for Eric? Anybody be able to do that number? Let's call it a 25% return. He wants to pay £10,000 a year. What's the number? Come on, people. We're all in property. We do numbers and yields every day.
Well, Ben's put 40 grand. Thank you, Ben.
So explain those numbers.
So it's 10,000 divided by 25%,
Go on.
which gives you 40,000.
And how do you get to, so 10%, 25%?
So 10,000 divided by 25% gives you 40,000.
Acknowledging this was a serious and difficult time for workers and inflation, but the government will do everything it could to help. The recent MP Rachel Hopkins was close to tears.
Yeah, please, can you mute yourself?
Devastating for her town and its economy.
Thank you.
So according to Ashard, who is an actuary, which is a posh accountant, it's £40,000. There's the amount that you can afford to pay for a commercial property to get your 25% yield on £10,000. That's what you need. People mystify commercial property, right? And it's not that mysterious at all. It's very, very simple. It starts, like all businesses, with the customer, not with the property, right? And that's what most people get wrong in the quote property business, or actually in property investing, right? Because they're actually, it's almost like the customer's an inconvenience. You know, the person who actually pays you, they're an inconvenience. Well, they're not. They're the customer. They're the person who actually makes you money. So with every business, you start with the customer. You pick your ideal customer, right? And you say, right, I want this customer because X, Y, and Z, right? What property can I then buy that services that customer? And once you've made that decision, then you know what property you can buy. But most people start a property business the wrong way around, and it's because of all this sale about, investor. Here's an interesting thing. I've had a property business for 30 years, just coming up actually nearly 32 to be precise, right? I've never been a property investor in my whole life. I run a property business. I have customers who live and work in my properties. I don't invest in property. If I invest in anything, I invest in people. I invest in my customers. Because here's an interesting fact that most of you are not going to agree with. Property doesn't make money. If you get a property tomorrow morning and nobody buys it and nobody rents it, that property never makes any money. See, people make money, property doesn't. So if you're going into commercial property, you look at who your ideal customer is, and you say, that's my ideal customer, Me, I have an ideal customer, customer avatar, which is small business people. I like small business people, mom and dad operations, right? I don't really like dealing with PLCs. I buy a lot of property from CLCs, but I don't tend to rent to PLCs as often as I rent to Mr. and Mrs. Jones, because I understand Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I started off in a small business at 15. I understand renting a commercial unit. I understand the type of people that I can relate to and can relate to me. They're called my customers. And then I go and find properties that suit those customers. Got time for a story, Sunil?
Yeah, please. We're going to go to Kerry next, but yeah, please.
Right, quick story, and then we'll go to Kerry. We've got a couple of small industrial estates, and I remember when we opened our first industrial estate, I thought, how do I find the customers for this industrial estate, and how do I find the industrial estate? Yeah, does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So there was 2 or 3 industrial estates round about where I lived, and a little bit farther away. So I took a clipboard and I knocked on the doors. And here's what I like about commercial businesses. You can't really go and knock on Mrs. Jones's house and say, why do you live in this house, Mrs. Jones? Right? She might tell you to go away. Yeah. But you can go and knock on businesses' doors and say, hello, can I ask you a couple of questions? And about 50% of the people in these industrial units said, no, you can't, I'm too busy. And about 50% said, yeah, you can have 10 minutes, right? And I went round and I said to these people, right, we're thinking about opening a small industrial units, maybe about 25, 30 units. I see you rent one of these. Can I ask you the positive things about where you rent at the moment and the negative things about where you rent at the moment? Yeah? So I took the details of the positive things, the things I really liked about where they rented, and I took the negatives. And then I went home and I collated this information, and 3 things came up that they really wanted that they didn't have, right? 1, this won't surprise you people, they wanted a cheaper rent. 2, they wanted a location that was more central, closer to motorways, because they run businesses. And 3, they wanted security. That was an interesting one. That really surprised me, because most industrial estates that you drive into, you can just drive in the middle of the night, you know, you can just drive around them. And they were concerned about that. So I now know what I was looking for. I was looking for somewhere that I could rent them competitively, right? I was looking for somewhere with a good location close to a motorway, and I was looking for somewhere that I could create security. So I then found a site. I didn't find a site and then find a customer, by the way. He's listening to this, right? I then found a site and I thought, that's good. It's got an 11-foot wall round about it, right? Big building, 60,000 square feet. And I thought, it's got a big wall round about it. It's 5 minutes from the motorway, and it's relatively inexpensive because I bought it directly from administrator. So I thought, okay, this looks like the thing. So we bought it and we started converting the units. And then we didn't have any customers. So I went back to these people and I knocked on the door again. And I said to them, hi, Paul, remember me? Yeah, guy about the industrial units. Listen, I just want to thank you for your help. Your help has been really, really useful. So useful, we now have an industrial estate. And it's less expensive than where you are at the moment. It's more centrally located than where you are at the moment, right? And it's got better security than where you are at the moment. How long do you think I didn't have customers for? Yes, Tony, I'm very good at what I do. So I started with the customer. I didn't start with the property. We're not really in the property business, people. We're in the people business. Now, some people have heard that and thought, that's really interesting. I want to learn more. And other people have completely switched off because I'm not talking about yields and property values going up and the market making you money. I'm talking about having a business. Sunil, you had another question.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Daniel, we'll come back if that's okay, if we got time. Kerry, you've asked a couple of questions in the chat regarding auctions, etc. So that'd be a good change of subject. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your question. Would you like to unmute and ask it yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
I can see you.
Yeah. So I am very new to property. I've been educating myself on various strategies for just over a year. And I'm looking for my first flip and considering auctions. So I'm just wondering if you've got any advice on the best way to go, what needs to be done by me or experts in the lead up to the auction so I can do my due diligence.
You want to go first or second, Sunil? We've both bought property at auction on numerous occasions. I've sold property at auction. I've been around property auctions. Started going to property auctions, Kerry, when I was 16.
Wow.
I bet you didn't even think they had property auctions back in those days.
No, not really.
I went to my first property. I started going to car auctions and property auctions when I was 16 and didn't buy my first property at auction until I was early 30s, I think.
Okay.
You want to go first or second, Sunil?
I'll go second.
Okay.
Okay.
What would I say about property auctions? There's two perceptions about property auctions. One is there's some great bargains at property auctions. You know, everybody's seen homes under the hammer. And the other perception is everything that's in a property auction is there for a reason and it's rubbish. Neither of which are true, wholly true. There's some good properties in auction, there's some really bad properties in auction. And you have to be very careful when buying in auction, because a lot of traders put properties into auction, right? And I did a percentage of property trading, and they're usually okay properties, right? But there's a lot of people who don't trade properties, trade meaning buy and sell, right? There's a lot of people who put properties into auction because they have a huge amount of problems, right? And you have to be able to tell the difference. And there's no quick and easy way to do that. It can be an expensive exercise going to auction because you should always get a solicitor to read the auction pack. Yeah. Unless you've got a very good relationship with your solicitors, as we do, because we only pay for anything that we buy. We don't pay for them looking. They might look at 10 packs, but we only buy one, so we only pay for one. But very difficult to find that relationship when you're first starting. Yeah. Secondly, you have to be able to understand the structure of a property and understand if there's any structural issues. That takes a skill set that you're probably going to have to buy in. Mm-hmm. So for a first-time property person buying something at auction, statistically, you are more likely to make a mistake than get a bargain. Yeah. I would probably suggest, not advise, but suggest that you get some experience underneath your belt, generally with property, before you dive into auctions. That's my view, Sunil. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think you're looking for properties below market value, and I think, Kerry, you said, let's have a look at auctions. This is a really big subject, and I was going to do a 12-week training on Zoom for buying properties at auctions. Just a couple of tips. Need to check the legals, like Paul said, and if you've never done that, then speak to a solicitor. And some solicitors, the solicitors that we've used in the past, they basically charge two fees. One fee to check the legal paperwork, and then if you're successful at auction, they charge another fee to complete. They don't charge you whole amount. So for argument's sake, let's say the fee is going to be £700. They may charge you £350 for checking, and then they may charge you £350 after you've purchased. So you're not putting all your money up front, which is great. Like Paul and like a lot of people on here, I could probably tell you loads of stories where things have happened, good and bad, at auctions. So finance is really, really important. I've got a picture here somewhere, but one December, about 5-6 years ago, I purchased a property after auction. So that brings me on to my other point. There are three points that you can buy the property.
Yeah.
Before auction, during the auction, or after the auction. And after the auction is probably, in my view, the best, because that vendor has probably had 3 or 4 weeks of marketing. The auction has been telling him how great it is and how the market is great and how much they're going to sell it, etc. And then they're deflated. And the reason they're in an auction is they may have a motivation to sell. So other properties in auctions are there because it's a charity, local government, and they have to be seen to be transparent. So there are good reasons for them being there, but the finance is so important. So 1 December, after the auction, I decided to buy a property, 300 grand, put down my 10%, £30,000. The auctioneer actually came to our office to get the paperwork signed because he thought, well, you know, this is a good deal. The property at the auction had a reserve of £330,000. 330,000. I bought for 30. Christmas time, completion was 28 days. And then after the 28 days, you can also get a 10-day where they serve a notice. And the notice starts on the point that they actually serve the notice for 10 days. It could be 5 days. It depends what the contract says. So in this situation, didn't have all the money ready. Well, it's okay. I'll go and speak to them and they'll be fine. He's the worst person I'd ever dealt with in my career. And he basically turned around and he said, well, you can have your extension of another 10 days or 15 days to get your money ready. And guess how much it was going to cost me? Correct, £30,000, because that's what he had lost in his mind at the auction, because he wanted 330, he only got 300. As it happened, I managed to get the money from a private investor, complete the deal, and it all went smoothly. But yeah, I can, you know, tell you other things that have happened. Auctions are an amazing, amazing place. Okay, I would the auctions in the rooms are no longer in Kent, but they were the 10 years. You know, all the time they were on 10. We had a stand there. I used to go every single 6 weeks. You know, talk to people, networking. Tony, you know, if you want to find investors, that's where they are. All the people that are, but you don't get that now because it's all online, so you don't see people. But check the legals and check the legals on the day again of the auction, because you could check it 2 weeks before the auction, Kerry, and they can change on the day. And you've got some very, very clever people who'll turn around and put in the wording, the purchaser must pay the seller's legal fees a minimum of £10,000. Okay. And they won't write that in numbers so it sticks out. They'll write it in letters. And we had a lady that we know, Paul and I both know, and she'd brought a property. I think it was in Liverpool. She said it in open public, so I'm not sharing anything that is not in the public forum. She brought a property in Liverpool, and then afterwards, she realised she had to pay more fees. And she said, well, my solicitor checked everything. Yeah, her solicitor had checked it 2 weeks before. By the time on the auction day, it's called an addendum, and they are any things that have changed on the day. So that is really, really important. They can put anything in there, in that legal pack, and you would have to adhere to it. So we have had auction packs which also say, we have a tenant in the property and the tenant owes £20,000. The seller must pay that £20,000. Sorry, the purchaser must pay the seller the £20,000. Yeah. And if you agree to that, that money's due. We have currently mortgage companies who have tenants in the property and they don't want to go through the process of evicting that tenant to give a clean property. They're just putting the property in with the tenant. So a lady called me about a month ago and she said, I think I've got a squatter in my property. But she didn't have a squatter. The mortgage company had actually put on the legal paperwork that the property may be occupied under a tenancy agreement, that they have tried to regain possession of the property by changing the locks. The person's moved back in again. It was dealt with, but I don't want to put you off. I think it's a fact. I've brought I love buying properties at auction. I think there's an excitement to it. I think there's some fantastic bargains to be had. But it's actually the paperwork is the key. and making sure you've got your finances is the other key point.
Yeah.
Yes, Paul, if you want to come back in on that.
Well, as I say, I think you know, we made a living out of auctions at one point in time when I was younger in property trading. Even bought properties in one auction and put them into another auction and made money. However, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
There's a whole psychology around auctions, you know, sort of, and I've looked at it and it really interests me because a lot of it's driven by greed, the greed of the vendor to get the best price, the greed of partly the purchaser to get the best price. And you need two people, you can have a bit of competition, and that price is then pushed up. And the auctioneer can be one of those people because they've got a limit to go to, and they will bid on the owners or the vendor's behalf. Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be worth, as you say, might be worth running an event one evening and just kind of like explaining a lot of the rules and the laws around kind of property. I remember I took part in a Zoom meeting up here in Scotland with one of the local networking events, and one of the auctions came along to sell their wares, and it was an interesting discussion about how transparent auctions are. And generally speaking, there are a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, auctions are not there to be transparent.
Yeah.
Well, we'll move on to the next question because I see it is getting close to 7.
Yes, certainly. So, Kerry, yeah, we're going to do a course next year, 12 weeks on Zoom, 2 evenings a week and things like that. So I'll let you know all about that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. Don't let me put you off. If you need any help, you know where
I'll be tapping you up for your contacts.
Yeah, no, you know where I am. So, you know, you've got my number as well. I've got YouTube, you know, where I brought auctions and what we've done with them. So, yeah, check out YouTube and I can send you the links. Santa, congratulations on your award there. So, if you want to unmute and ask your question, that'd be fantastic. I hope I've said your name right.
Hi, it's Sunita. Hi. Sorry, I've got a baby on my lap, so if you hear a baby, it's just my little one.
never too young to get started in property, so that's good that you know get some knowledge. But
just multitasking right now. So thank you for having me. I'm new to this. This is the first time I've been on here, by the way. So hi everyone. It's been interesting just listening to everyone's questions and answers. So yeah, thank you. Just listening to what you were saying about auctions, I'm kind of in a similar boat to Kerry in terms of auctions, and I've been listening to what you were saying in regards to properties potentially having structural issues. But I've also been looking into that. Is it such a big deal if you get a property that does have structural issues? Because from what I've looked into, there's stuff like resin and underpinning to kind of to kind of amend any subsidence issues. So I guess my question is, if I was to buy a property at auction and it did have subsidence, as long as you bought it for the right price, and then you spoke to your broker and you could get a mortgage on it afterwards, after it's had its warranty on the underpinning, then surely it's not a bad deal then, as long as you've got it for the right price that counters in the cost of the underpinning and the resin or whatever you need doing.
I agree with your child when she screamed at the point where you said, is it okay to buy it? Tell your story. When you've been in the business as long as I have, you've kind of you've heard a million stories and you've seen a million people do things. So I remember a chap buying a cottage that had some undermining issues at auction, and he bought it very, very cheaply. So I'll give you some numbers at the time. The cottage would probably have been worth somewhere around the £500,000 mark. And it had this collapsing wall at one end of it, which they decided was needed underpinned, and that's what it said in the auction particulars. And he paid less than £100,000 for it. So you think, well, he's got to make money, hasn't he? However, it turned out that when they actually dug down to do the underpinning, the reason that it was collapsing is because there was an old sewer that was running along the edge of this property. And the building was collapsing into the sewer, but the sewer was still, although it was old, it was still part of the current drainage system. So in order to repair it, he couldn't build a house over the top of it again because that was illegal. So once he discovered the sewer, the council came along and went, you can't build the house back over the top of it. You're not allowed to build over the top of the sewer. So he then had two choices, which was demolish the cottage, right, or to move the sewer. So he decided to move the sewer. That was £350,000. Then he restored the cottage, which was another £150,000, and then they had the guts of £100,000 that he paid for the property. Can anybody here count?
Not good.
So does that answer your question?
Yes. So how do you, so I'm guessing you'd have to get a structural survey done to be sure. Would that even show in a structural survey?
That wouldn't have shown on a structural survey because there wasn't where. What would have shown on a structural survey was that there was collapsing to the end of the building. The cause of the collapsing, they could only establish that by digging trenches and looking at the cause of the collapsing. Nobody before an auction is going to let you dig a trench beside their property to discover what the cause of the collapsing is.
So basically, what I'm trying to understand is that if you are buying property where there's potential structural issues, you would need to absolutely have a structural survey done. But then when you're at auction, there is a lot of uncertainty, as in you can get your structural survey done on that property, but if someone's outbid you and you're on a budget, then that's obviously money lost as well. But then is it that, how is it that you approach a auction? Is it that you do 3 structural surveys on 3 properties that you're looking to buy and hope that you get one of them? Then how would you approach it?
The point of that particular story is you could have paid for a structural survey. In case you did miss the point of the story, you could have paid for a structural survey. They would have said the end of that building needs rebuilt. It wasn't until they were dug down to put the foundations in that discovered the cause of that. And by that time, it's too late and you've bought it.
So, yeah, my view on that is initially look for things that are simpler. If you know there's a structural issue, you've got to get structural surveys, etc., etc. Unless you've got a motivation or a reason for buying that property, look for simpler properties, because there are lots of properties out there and there's lots of properties in auction that you'll be able to make money on. Is there a reason why you want this particular one?
It was for growth, for my growth, to get me out of my comfort zone, mainly, more than anything. But and also because my strategy is buy, refurbish, refinance. So it's about making sure that there's enough profit to refinance as well. Sorry, I've got a teething baby in the background.
No, that's
sorry about it. I think unless you've got the money for a structural situation, cash will come in. Cash is a fantastic mortgage broker that you'll come in, but you could exchange at auction on that. You could have your value, you could have your report, your structural report, you could have everything in place. But if the lender doesn't want to lend, you're bound by the contract that you have entered into. And I think that's the important thing. So Cash, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, hi everyone. What I was going to say on that is it depends on what the structural issues are. We have a case right now where my client is buying a property, not in auction, but directly through an agent, and there has been the surveyor has reported there's a long-standing movement, right? There's a movement in the property. Now, because it's long-standing, it's not current, they're okay because it's long-standing and the property is not going to move anywhere. Had that been a current movement where the property is still moving, then it's a no-no. So I think the issue here is if you're buying an auction, then of course the finance, I think we talked about finance as well earlier on. Getting the finance secured is very important, but the bridging lender in this case, or even when you're buying with cash, as long as we know that we can fix the issue and the lender can be convinced, then it's a yes. But to get to that point, we have to understand, can we actually fix the issue or not?
Yeah, brilliant, Cash. Thank you. Cash's number's in the chat box. If you want that, reach out to him. I hope that answered the question. I'm going to move on, but you've got my number in there. You've got Paul's number there on the screen. Please feel free to reach out. We're going to go to Ben and then Elena, and then we're going to close, if that's okay, because time is passing. So Ben, good evening. Thanks, Ashak. I will come back to you. Sorry. Or do you want to go first? I did say you're next. Sorry. Go for it, Ashak. Ben, we'll come to you next, and then Elena, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil.
Sorry.
Yeah, so when I was listening to Paul earlier on, when he mentioned people before property and, it's the people that pay you, not the property, that took me kind of right back to the first time I kind of heard him speak. And I think that was before COVID times. And the thing that struck me was he just thinks different. And I think that's like each time there's been a question and answer, in my mind is kind of went, all right, I hadn't really thought of that. And I did that for a wee while when I met him, at a couple of events to sort of followed around to see what I could pick up. But in the end, what really made the difference for me was getting the real quality information came when I started working with him. So, even just now, he still blows my mind here, but working with him is a whole different level. I don't know, Sunil, what your experiences have been kind of like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Paul talks about relationships. He picked up on negotiations. It's all about, I went to Paul thinking he's going to ask me about spreadsheets and he's going to ask me about property. It wasn't. It was all about the people, the relationship. And I'm involved in a partnership for the last 5 years. Within 5 minutes, Paul had told me the thinking process of the gentleman that is my business partner. And for 5 years, I didn't have it so clear. So, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm sure Jody will as well. That has worked with Paul, and it's absolutely fantastic getting thumbs up there from Jody. So, yeah, I'm glad that you said that. And this is why I enjoy coming on here with Paul, spending time with Paul on Clubhouse and any time we get. So, yeah, it was
There's an interesting thing about people in business. One of the things you learn in business is there's 3 types of people in business. There is what I've classed as the window shopper. That's the person who will kind of listen to you and be very keen on what you say, but will never actually kind of purchase anything from you. There's the customer. That's the person who kind of meets you instantly. I remember Jodie was an instant customer. She heard me speak at one event and kind of said, how do I work with you? Customer. And then there's the shoplifter. And the shoplifter is somebody who will go to as many events as possible, right, and try and steal as much information as they can because they don't want to pay for anything. And in business, you will only ever find a window shopper, a shoplifter, and a customer. And while Ashard's being very nice to me now, when we first met, he was a shoplifter. He followed me around these events trying to get little bits of tidbits of information because God forbid he should have to pay for anything. Then he became a window shopper, right? I'm really interested, and then eventually he became a customer. He went a long way round for a shortcut. Jodie instantly became a customer. It's just an interesting fact. I'm sure Sunil will comment what he was and what he is, but it's an interesting fact.
I think there was a lot of I know there was a lot of respect from day one, but the timing wasn't right for me to work with you. And now I think looking back, well, I wish I had done that 5 years ago, but I didn't know you at that time. So yeah. Jodie, I think you'd be very proud of me today because I've been on my feet on Zoom for a couple of hours standing trying to get exercise while I'm working. So I hope you think that's great.
So I've got some more questions before we wrap up.
I've got 2 questions. I did promise they'll be quite quick, so if it's okay, Paul. Ben, can we come to you, and then Elena's going to have the final question, if that's okay. Ben, over to you.
I think Tony also I promised a second question, so you can get around to a second question.
Yeah, no problem. Ben? The mute button is just next to your camera that you just turned off, that you're back on now. Okay, let me try and unmute you from here.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now, Sunil?
We can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant.
Great. That's I'm no good with technology, as you've already found out. So it was really a word of a warning and a tip, because I've read through some of the questions and listened to some of the questions, and I've run my own business for 17 years, and I started it with literally less than nothing. And as Paul said, I went to the customers first before I even got any equipment. And then, for some very strange reason, a number of years later, decided to follow my parents' footsteps with houses. But instead of taking the same approach as I did with my own business, I decided to listen to big mentors. And anyway, by sheer luck, which it was luck, I managed to do okay at that. But the word of warning is, it's just hearing people talking about auctions and new to the property business, and then quite happy to take huge loans and things like that. And I just think it's starting at the wrong stage, and it ties in with a tip, really. I've moved back into an area I love, and I went to my local meeting last night, and from that I found they had a bit of a problem with, there was a piece of land they knew nobody owned. They wanted to use that piece of land, but they didn't want to have the responsibility of trying to claim it. So I don't know how to claim it, but I'll look into how to claim it. I very much doubt it's going to cost me anything other than a good solicitor. So it's just really, be careful who you listen to, and don't underestimate the power and the knowledge of just local people in your area, and expand your mind a bit before going down a route that everyone seems to go down. So that's it, really.
Don't follow the crowd, I think you just said, Ben.
Yes, quite so.
Brilliant. And thank you for joining us this evening. I think you said it was the first time. So thank you. Elena, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Sunil. Thank you. Paul, it's been really fascinating listening to your career as a businessman. You even mentioned starting at 15 and going to the car auctions, and look at how much you've achieved and the advice that you're giving to other people. But may I ask you, have you reflected at all on your own exit strategy as a businessman?
Yeah, so we write a business plan every 5 years, and we are currently in our exit strategy at the moment. So we wrote a business plan for our exit strategy. So I am exiting property at the moment, and well, a couple of other businesses have been involved as well. You should never start a business and look at the entrance door without looking at the exit door.
Absolutely. I mean, what a great bit of advice for the younger people who are in the sort of acquisition stage of their
And it's one of the reasons why I don't like buy-to-let as a business.
Okay.
Because if you think about buy-to-let, right, Sunil's got quite a large portfolio of properties. And if Sunil was to exit tomorrow morning, right, people would actually, if they were buying all of his buy-to-let properties off of him, would actually want a discount. So you think about it, if you go buy 10 properties off of somebody, right, you're not going to pay them, even though they've set them up, they've got tenants in them, etc. You're not going to pay them a premium because they've set that business up. You're actually going to want a discount. Whereas most other businesses, including commercial property, incidentally, right, you would pay a premium for the business. So we're exiting some commercial properties at the moment, and because we have brought a tenant, and because we've had that tenant for some time, and because we've got proof of concept as a business, then people are not paying the market value for the property. They're paying the market value for the property and then an amount of money for the business. So when you look at businesses, one of the reasons I really don't like buy-to-let, and that's somebody who had over 100 tenants at one point in time, but one of the reasons I don't like buy-to-let is because it's very difficult to create value in the business itself. Whereas other businesses, you can create a business. I'll give you an example. One of the businesses that we built was a van rental business a number of years ago. And what we discovered a niche in the market, or I created a niche in the market, depending on your point of view. And we didn't really want to be a big van rental company, but we knew that we could take this niche in the market and one of the bigger companies would come along and buy us out. So within 2.5 years, they bought all of our, what we called the metal, which was the vans, and then they paid a substantial amount of money for the goodwill and the contracts. So if you think about it, van rental and property rental are very similar. You buy something, you rent it out, you have a contract, right? Because it wasn't day-to-day rental, it was van leasing. So you had a contract, right? The difference is that if you go out and buy a buy-to-let property and then you put a tenant in it and you have a contract with them and then you take it to the open market, somebody will probably want to pay you less than the market value of the property because it has a sitting tenant. You go out and you start a van rental business and you get a lease for those vans over 3 years. Somebody will buy the vans and they will buy the business, in other words, the lease. So one of the reasons I don't like buy-to-let as a business is because you are not adding value. So all the businesses we've been involved in, with the exception of the buy-to-let business, we didn't only have an exit strategy, we had an exit strategy that made the business worth a lot more than the time, effort, and money that we put into it.
Right.
Elaine, but Paul is selling some of his properties as they become empty, I believe. So that is his strategy, to have a debt-free portfolio.
So what about you and your life, Paul? I mean, you've talked about exiting from, as my understanding is, a certain
I'm not ready to exit my life yet.
No. I meant, do you ever reflect upon exiting your life as a businessman? That's what I meant to say, regardless of which business you're selling.
I tried to retire. I'm 61, right? Everybody can say I look younger, thank you. But I even got a smile there. That was good. When I was 52, I hit that kind of what's the terminology the gurus use? I became financially free, right, in my late 40s. In other words, I didn't have to go to work, right? I built a business that made me money when I was sleeping. And when I was 52, I got a bump on the head and I got a thing called post-concussion syndrome, which is horrible. Don't ever get it. I don't advise it, right? So I decided to retire, and I retired for a couple of years. And we went on, I think it was 5 cruises one year, and we did all the stuff, right? And my wife looked into my eyes one day and she said, "Your eyes are dead." And I went, "I know." And she said, "Go back to work." Right. And I went back to work. Now, I don't work as hard as I once did. I work smarter rather than harder at this age, but I love work. I now do consultancy. I used to do consultancy for large PLCs. You know, I've done consultancy for Tesco, for Carillion, for, you know, major organizations. I now do quite a bit of consultancy with smaller businesses like Jody's and like, well, Sunil's a reasonable sized business, and a couple of other people that were on here as well. And I just love business. Business to me is like a Rubik's Cube. I can go into a business, right? And I don't know why I can do this, maybe 45 years in business, and I can go click, click, click. There you go. Your business works better now. Right. And most of the guys that I've worked with will tell you I've done that click, 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 and the business just works better. Right. Do I ever want to stop doing that? Yeah, the day I stopped breathing. So, do I have an exit plan from work? Yeah, I probably will, over the next 2 to 3 years, exit our businesses. But I'll always be involved in business as long as I'm smart enough, healthy enough, and capable.
And what about thoughts about your legacy? And you know, and property particularly, you know, that your ownership of property.
Well, we're selling all of our properties.
Okay, that interests me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have one son. He's 16. We'll set up a trust for him. I've gave him. We've got a farm that we live on. We've also got a house in the city as well. So I've set up a trust. The house in the city goes to him when he's 18. This is boring, is it not, people? My personal life, is this not boring?
No.
I think you're spot on. I think it's really interesting.
So the house goes to him when he's 18. I've set up a trust which will give him a reasonable amount of money, but not enough to live on. So he'll have to go out and get some work, right? But he can take a kind of job that he enjoys rather than one that makes a lot of money. So that's my legacy for my son. My wife is a fair bit younger than I am, smarter and prettier, none of which is difficult. But and she's a writer, so she's still got a fair-sized career in front of her. I don't know why any of that would interest you, but there you go. There's the Paul Merrick life story.
Elaine, it is interesting though, isn't it? Because then we can get the person behind what you say.
Yeah, it's also interesting because Paul and yourself, Sunil, are giving so much value and advice to people that are coming into this industry. I'm just interested in, like the next phase. Everybody is like coming to these meetings interested in about, buying stuff and going to auctions and refinancing and all of that. How do you stop? And everything that we buy, especially as you are getting older, is going to incur inheritance tax as well. And
the government's just done a great job of that as well, because when it was in a company previously, then it was protected from inheritance tax, because Margaret Ann's my business partner. Margaret Ann's my wife and business partner. And my son was coming into the business, and we used to have that protected. That was in a box, but the government have just changed that, which is interesting. But here's a piece of it. I don't really give advice. You said advice. I don't give advice. I talk about experience. If you've noticed tonight, what I've done is talked about experience rather than tells. I have no idea what anybody in this room should do with their life. I'm still working on mine, right? I think I'll become a guru when I grow up. I'm just not ready to grow up yet. Best thing I ever read. Here's the best thing I ever read. Stay childlike, but not childish. And, I think I've managed it. I might have even managed being childish on occasion as well. But if I was to give advice, I would say most people get into property with no plan other than to buy the next property. And my wife is a professional writer. We co-authored a book and put it out last year. And I'm very pleased to say we did absolutely no marketing whatsoever, other than kind of occasionally talking about it on events like this. Spent no money on marketing. And on more than one occasion, it beat some of the gurus' books on the chart. I was very pleased with that. Right. Thank you. There you go. Jodie's showing it. Right. Unpacking your property business plan. And when we first started our business, we sat down, because I'm a business guy who happens to be in property. I'm not a property guy who happens to be in business. Okay. Well, I'll say that again. I'm a business guy who happens to be in property. I'm not a property guy who conveniently got a business because they said there was more tax relief that way, right? And I sat down and I said to Margaret, and I'm going to go into property as a full-time business. And I wrote a business plan. And the aspiration in the business plan was within 5 years, we would have £1 million worth of debt-free property, £1 million worth of debt-free property. And within 3.5 years, we had £1.2 million worth of debt-free property and an income of over £100,000 per annum. And people could say, well, you're relatively smart, Paul, or you're relatively capable, or you're relatively good communicator. And all of those may or may not be true, depending on your opinion. I'm sure there's mixed opinions in this room, right? However, what I did know how to do was write a good business plan, and what I did know how to do was follow it. And every 5 years since then, sorry, we write another 5-year business plan that has taken us to multi-million pounds worth of debt-free property. And I would say
what are you going to do with it all?
The money or the property?
The property.
Give it to Tony.
Well, the property's selling, and we're doing quite well with that. Thank you. The money, we don't need as much as we have made. Let me put it to you that way.
Well, I was asking about the property particularly.
We're selling the property. I'm selling off my property. We're in this disposal phase of my property business. We're in the disposal phase. So we sold, I think, this year, 22 properties, last year 18 properties. And when I say properties, I don't necessarily just mean 2-bedroom buy-to-lets. I mean, you know, properties. We've just sold a site. We're just doing the legals for a site, actually. We're probably done for the end of the year, which is for 180 units, 180 flats. It's a development site for 180 flats. We're in the disposal phase of our business. My son has no interest in it. He's an arty type. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking about me again. He's an arty type, and my wife's a professional writer. So I've built what I wanted to build, and now I'm taking it apart.
Good luck.
So far, so good.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for all the questions. Really appreciate it. We have run out of time, but if people want to do this again, if Paul's agreeable, we'll certainly do again. I've got so much value. You say
I still want to hear Tony's last question.
Yeah, come into that. Let's go there now, Tony.
Oh, well, I don't know if we'll manage to get through it in 2 minutes, but the debt-free thing, I was wondering how you managed to get debt-free.
I got into property because, now me and Sunil completely disagree about this, right? So there's two sides of every coin, isn't there? There's no, I'll tell you what I don't like about the internet, right? Everybody on the internet thinks they're right.
Yeah. Oh,
and they are. They're right for them. Right, but they think they're right for everybody, right? I'm not saying you or anybody else should do this. I'm saying this is what we got into property. I got into property, and one of the things I said in that first 5-year business plan is I got into property to own property. I didn't get into property to own debt.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with somebody at a networking event pre-2020. And I was speaking at that networking event because I only tend to go to networking events where I'm speaking. And the chap come up afterwards and he said, what size portfolio have you got? And I said, that's a really cheeky question. Right. But it's substantial numbers. And he said, I've got a £10 million portfolio. I said, well, that's very impressive, sir. Right. And how much of that is debt free? What do you mean? I said, well, how much debt have you got on it? 75% debt. I said, right, so you've got a £2.5 million debt portfolio. Well, except for what I owe my investors. I said, what do you owe your investors? He said, £250,000. I said, you've got a wonderful size portfolio. I got into property to own property. Here's an interesting thing about property. Does everybody in this room believe you get what you focus on in life?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So if you go out focusing every day, and this is why I was kind of questioning your investors. If you go out focusing every day on how can I borrow money, guess what you managed to find? A lot of borrowed money. I went out every day, and what's interesting about that portfolio that's valued in millions and is debt-free is I started that with £40,000 and the property made the rest of the money.
Yes.
I made money out of property to buy property. There's an alien concept, isn't it? I made money out of property to buy property.
Yeah.
But why I think most people don't do that is because they're focused on finding the debt.
Mm.
I was focused on finding the profit.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you traded, you bought and
I've
sold?
done, I don't, there's very few things in property that I have not done, as I alluded to earlier on. When I first started in property, I traded in property because £40,000 was going to buy me essentially one property somewhere.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I was stuck. So I've traded out of some wonderful properties. You know, I've traded out of properties. People go, why didn't you hold on to that? And I go, because I didn't have the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we got into, so can I break down in a couple of minutes? Sorry, I know we're running over, Sunil, so I'll wrap this up very quickly. Our business had 4 business models within it. I don't have strategies, I have business models. We had property rental, which was both residential and commercial property.
Mm-hmm.
We had property trading, which is buying and selling, not fixing, but just buying and selling. We had property development, which is buying property and developing it. And we had property speculation, which is buying property and holding it till its value went up. 3 out of those 4 make big chunks of money, Tony.
Yeah.
1 makes strips of money. The rental makes strips of money in the bucket every day. Is this making sense to everybody? Any nodding? Yeah?
Yeah.
And some people can't nod, apparently. Their head doesn't move. Or they're just ignorant. I'm not sure which. It's one of the two. Strips of money in the bucket.
Yeah.
Right. And the other 3 made chunks of money. And with those chunks of money, we bought more property.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Did we use what you call investors? I call JV partners. Yes, we did. Right. We didn't borrow. We've never borrowed money off of JV partners. We've always literally JV'd with them, joint ventured with them. Both of us, if we both make money, we both make money. If we both lose money, we both lose money. Right. Did we do that in the beginning? Yes, we did. Do I still do that today? Yeah, if a project's too big for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'll still take on somebody and say, you know, well, we both have a go at this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you. I think that's a model I'm looking for. I'm not looking to buy and
I think the real key to that model isn't anything clever. If you go out every day saying, where can I find borrowed money? Then you will find borrowed money, but you're not focusing on making money. You're focusing on borrowing money.
Yeah.
If you go out every day and focus on making money, guess what happens? You make money.
Yeah. Yeah. That chimes with me, I must say. Yeah.
Okay, back to you, Sunil.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm glad we took that last question, Tony, because I've got, again, focus on making money rather than looking for money, which is fantastic. So on that note, we're going to close. Next week on the 4th of December, we have our Christmas meal, which is in the evening at the Apple Yard. I put a link in the box. Everybody's welcome.
That's going to be difficult for me to do by Zoom.
No, we can Zoom people in. We have the technology now. So yeah, you have to get your own dinner, but we can certainly Zoom people in. Come back to me in the next couple of days if you're interested in more of this. And Paul's happy to do. Then happy to share. You know, we love doing it. Get so much value. Fantastic questions, everybody. And thank you for joining us. If I don't see you before Christmas, have a great time. And hopefully I will see you and we'll catch up very soon. Okay, Paul, thank you again for your time. Amazing questions and amazing answers. So really appreciate everything. Okay. See you soon.
Numbers on the screen there, guys. If anybody wants a blether and just kind of like to catch up and kind of get some kind of ideas of what they might do or what they should do or what we've done, whatever, then my number's on the screen.
Yeah, just take a picture of the number, please, because I need to close down in a few minutes. And if you're on the WhatsApp group, if you need anything, just let me know. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great time. See you soon.
Nice to meet you all. Take care.
Happy investing.